hello, Dumelang, and welcome to this month's episode of the IAB Insight Series. Can you believe that we're in September? You're probably all feeling it because I think we all have a little bit of burnout. Hope you're all taking care. And I'm your host, Tshegofatso Phetlhe, and today our speakers will be showcasing the opportunity to engage targeted audiences online through the specialty of digital content marketing, where we specifically look at how digital content marketing helps you build first-party databases, and we'll also look at case studies that highlight possibilities, as well as hear from the IAB SA Digital Content Committee lead on the latest definitions and guidelines. Our guests today are Sarah Browning-De Villiers, who is Chief Content Officer at Machine Publicis Groupe Africa and IAB SA Digital Content Marketing Committee lead, Candice Lee-Reeves, Senior Digital Copywriter at Everlytic, and Bronwyn Bowley, who is the Senior Content Manager at Jellyfish and IAB SA Digital Content Marketing Committee member. Welcome all. We look forward to engaging with you. This episode is brought to you by Jellyfish, Gumtree, Everlytic, Ornico, and Biz Community. The 2021 IAB Insight Series is also approved for 2 CPD points at CMSA level under marketing by the Marketing Association of South Africa. But before we get into it, just some house rules and reminders. So there will be a couple of polls that will come up through the session, so don't be alarmed. It's not like a pop-up ad, don't close it, engage, please. It's a way of us interacting and knowing that you're with us. And the Q&A option is down here, so do put in your questions, especially after every single session and every speaker. And most importantly, engage with us on the IAB SA Twitter. So our handle is at IAB SA, and you can use the hashtag IAB Insights. A feedback survey will also be shared at the end of the show, so just to gauge your experience on the webinar, so do fill it out when you get a chance. So let's get into it. Let's start with the poll. So you'll see a poll pop up on your screen, and our question is, what is the biggest myth about digital content marketing? Is it that email marketing is dead? Is it that content videos should be shared across all platforms in order to be effective? Or is it that content marketing is easy and cheap? We look forward to hearing your answers. I want to see which myth actually wins the race. Oh, numbers are coming in. Okay. Looks like it's a bit of like a tight one between some answers. So biggest myth seems to be content marketing is easy and cheap, 61%. I think we all know that in this room. And then coming in second is that email marketing is dead. And lastly, content video should be shared across all platforms in order to be effective. Cool, let's get into it with our keynote speaker. Our keynote speaker today is Sarah Browning-De Villiers, who is the Chief Content Officer at Machine Publicis Groupe Africa and IAB SA Digital Content Marketing Committee lead. Sarah's career began in publishing, first at Condé Nast and then at Associated Media Hearst magazines, working on titles such as Glamour and Cosmopolitan. Sarah found herself at the epicenter of the publishing industry's bid to move from being print-centric to digitally savvy, heavily involved in driving collaboration and content between the publishing titles and commercial clients. Sarah became integral to conceiving, planning, and overseeing content marketing projects for clients such as L'Oreal, Unilever, the Foschini Group, Takealot.com, and Dispel. Sarah most enjoys the synergy between creativity, content, and meaningful business results. Sarah values relationship and trust, which is why many of her clients consider her a partner in their businesses and their successes rather than a supplier or a consultant. Sarah, this is amazing. I love this bio. Hello, welcome.
Thanks so much. Goodness, I don't know how to follow that. Thanks so much for having me. So excited to be here. I feel like I don't need to say much after that incredible introduction. I'm Sarah, and I am here with 2 hats on. I'm here as the lead for the Digital Content Marketing Committee, which is of course an IAB committee, which I'm super excited to be involved with. And I'm also here as Chief Content Officer for Machine, which is part of Publicis Groupe. And my job is to kind of set the scene for the conversation that we're going to have today. So I'm going to get straight into it because I know that we are tight on time. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what is content marketing. I think what's really exciting is, as the Digital Content Marketing Committee for IAB, this year we've established the first proper framework for articulating digital content marketing in South Africa. And I'm going to touch on that a little bit, also just to make sure we're all sort of speaking from the same page today when we talk about content marketing. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about the platform world. What is that? Why does it matter? Why should we care? And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the intersection point where content marketing and the platform world intersect. So first of all, some of you may have already seen this. The guiding framework is live on the IAB, and it's there for all of you to reference and input on. We realize that any sort of framework definitions evolve as our industry does. But I want to just talk a little bit about some of the guiding framework that we bedded down as a committee to articulate and understand what content marketing is specifically in our industry. So first of all, content marketing is a strategic marketing approach, distinct, I think, importantly from other marketing approaches, of creating and distributing relevant, consistent content targeted at defined audiences in order to add value to their lives at specific points in the user journey without using the brand or its product as the hero. And I think that quite crucial here is the without using the brand or its product as the hero. A lot of the marketing work that we all do involves content, but the difference between content that's used for marketing and content marketing is that when we look at content marketing, we think about it with the story in mind first. How are we adding value to a very specific audience, and then intersecting that with the brand? The other part of that, which is really relevant for today's conversation, is that content marketing delights, educates, informs, and entertains in order to build and engage owned loyal audiences, which means that from a brand point of view, you start to see the commercial value of the audience. And that's really crucial for today's discussion about the platform world and what we mean when we're talking about a platform world. Some of us and lots of my clients are at various parts of the journey of building owned audiences. And it's not to say that paying to rent audiences through platforms like Facebook or Google isn't an important part of your marketing mix. Strategically, of course it is. But ultimately, I think any content marketing strategy ideally wants to start founding a path for brands to start garnishing and harnessing their own audiences that they can own in their own space, and that they can turn not only into loyal audiences who they can upsell, cross-sell, and monetize, but also that they can mine for insights and data, which is really crucial in today's very sort of digitally transformed space that we're operating in. Cool. So in order to kind of further articulate what we mean by content marketing, the committee and our various stakeholders and advisory panels that contributed to this framework also then looked at sort of some key principles of what does this really look like? How do we really distinguish it from other marketing strategies, but also other types of content in our marketing space? So very importantly, content marketing takes an audience first approach. So instead of starting with the brand or the product or the thing that we need to sell or the business problem that we need to solve, we start with who are we talking to and what do they want and need? And that allows us to fulfill a need or a pain point or a challenge or an interest or a need. It could be educational, it could be entertainment, in order to then grow loyalty, get opt-in, get someone to say, cool, I'm cool with you continually talking to me and knowing more about me. And only later do we introduce the brand or product. So in a diagram, if you wanted to articulate that a little bit more clearly, we're playing in that sweet spot in the middle. So we start with what your audience cares about, which means we obviously need to know who your audience is. And that's often the first part of the puzzle that we have to do quite a bit of work on. And obviously many brands can have multiple audiences and multiple different segments and target markets. And then we overlay that with your area of expertise. So what is it that your brand is known for? What is the expertise space that you want to own in the market with your customers and consumers? What are you actually selling? So how do we intersect what your audience needs with something that ultimately connects to your brand? And in that sweet spot, you find a value proposition where you can deliver real value to your audience, giving them something that they need and care about, but also overlay that with your brand objectives, which fundamentally is typically selling something, converting it or changing a kind of behavior, and ultimately asking your audience to do something potentially a little bit costly. And that's really the sweet spot of content marketing. So with that in mind, content marketing also isn't a sort of stop-start, short-term approach. And this is quite important when you start to have bigger conversations around how you measure content marketing, what ROI looks like in the content marketing space. So it's quite an important principle to grapple with, and it can be a really challenging one in a space where I think many of us operate under the pressure of quarterly and annual KPIs as opposed to sort of 2, 3, 5 year goals. But content marketing is a long-term strategy. And the idea behind a great content marketing strategy is to grow a long-term relationship with an audience. So you're building a community that you can own as a brand. And again, this is where the platform world conversation becomes really, really interesting, because this is certainly the future, I believe, of effective, sustainable marketing tactics for any brand. And what you're trying to do is to grow a relationship that lasts, that evolves as those individuals in your audience evolve, which should ultimately enhance the lifetime value of the community, as well as give you a really amazing live audience that you can be harnessing insights and better understanding your audience to inform things like your products and your sales and your brand strategies. And then as part of all of that, we start laddering up to the platform conversation. So content marketing then ultimately should be moving towards building a first party owned audience. And you do that by attracting them to an experience or destination that your brand owns and can then optimize to achieve its broader marketing objectives, right? So it's all very well building an audience, but if you aren't then able to harness that either for insights or to monetize it, arguably that audience has a limited value to your brand. So content marketing is our way of reaching out to people, knowing what they need, knowing what they would be interested in, getting them involved in the conversation, being able to understand them better, being able to keep them in that space so that they don't just leave. But ultimately that still needs to feed into your broader marketing strategies from a commercialization point of view. So with all of that in mind, it also makes sense that digital content marketing is ongoing, iterative, and consistent. When we talk about building relationships with people, we all know that the best relationships are ones that are built over time, that are consistent and authentic in their approach, and that don't end the moment, your friend has asked you to do something for them, like babysit their children, and then they never speak to you again. So the premise of content marketing is to not only grow an audience and attract them, get them to opt in and to choose to seek you out and spend time with you as a brand, but also to feel like the relationship is authentic and evolving even after you've asked them to do something like buy something or change their behavior. I'm going to skip over this because of time, but loyalty and relationship building is a huge part of content marketing, very much to my earlier point. And we believe that does deliver against measurable business outcomes and objectives, particularly in return on investment. As I've mentioned before, often this is more effectively attributable over time. It's difficult to really measure effective ROI in content marketing on a short-term basis. But we also know that there's some amazing research out there that tells us that brands that invest over time in content marketing really do see overall uplift across various different categories and spaces. And I think just the final thing is that content marketing, by nature of being audience-led and there to build relationships, it becomes channel and medium agnostic. You go where your audience is and you speak to them in a way that they want to be spoken to. So it starts to intersect across all sorts of mediums and approaches to content creation, which is also really exciting. And what we're going to talk about when we talk about the platform world, if we think about how content fits into our broader marketing content spectrum, is really this space down here, where we are trying to get an audience to come to us and choose to spend time and seek us out because of the value that we're giving them. So yeah, I'm going to opt in, I'm going to subscribe, I'm going to come to a webinar or an event because you're actually giving value to me. And as part of that value exchange, I'm going to give you data, or I'm going to give you permission to keep talking to me. And we're going to keep that value exchange going through content. And what that means for you as a brand is that you're moving out of the rented audience space. So third-party publishers, Facebook, Google, still very important spaces to have in your strategy, and into the own audience space where you can start to own that first-party data set. But more than that, start to have increased number of touch points with those users, which gives you better insights and understanding. And it really gives you, as a brand, a hell of a lot more control, which becomes really, really exciting when you think about your longer term marketing objectives. Okay, cool. So let's park all of that for a moment. Very quickly, what do we mean by the platform world? Well, let's just take a look. I know this is 2018, but it's still pretty relevant. 7 out of the 10 most valuable globally companies now are platforms. So just think about Apple, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Alibaba, Tencent, Facebook. They no longer sell a commodity or a product or a service as their primary business offering. They sell data, they sell audiences, they sell attention, they sell insights. And they use their services or their product offering to get people there. And that's sort of like low-hanging fruit for them, but their business models are now much, much bigger than that. And that allows them to not only broaden how they can monetize their business, but also become really intersected and embedded in people's lives so that we can't really imagine the life without Google or potentially without Apple or Amazon. And that becomes really powerful for you as a brand. And it starts to sort of really change how you think of what you sell and what you offer to prospects and leads and to audiences. And I think that becomes really, really exciting. And I think even if you don't see yourselves as an Amazon or a Google, we should definitely see ourselves as how do we kind of really entrench and embed ourselves in people's lives, so much so that we not only know so much about them, but we become sort of such a natural and intuitive part of their lives. And if we think about some examples, this is in the Publicis world, of how brands who we perceive in a certain way to sell a certain product are starting to build out a platform model. There are some really good examples here of brands that we've worked with. I'm only going to touch on a few because of time, but Disney is a great one. We kind of in our heads think, well, Disney do cute movies. Well, no, not anymore. Cute movies are a reason for you to come and spend some time with them, but they're actually building out a massive platform capability in terms of owned audiences. And within that, they're selling an awful lot more than cute movies, but cute movies is why you go, why you seek them out and choose to spend time with them. Walgreens, which is an American pharmaceutical chain, have done what I think a lot of our local health brands are moving to do, which is, sure, then they sell medication, they're a dispensary, but much, much more than that. They've created a platform ecosystem where you kind of give them all of your health information, all of your familial information. They're starting to build out a really powerful platform view of not just your health, but your world. But they do that through content and service offerings that actually add value. So you've got a value exchange. They're busy building an enormous platform-based ecosystem that they monetize in many ways, and only a small part of that is actually their pharmaceutical dispensary system. And they're also using that to create affiliate partnerships where their partners can enjoy the benefits of insights and understanding within that data. It becomes really powerful. So again, just super quickly, what does a platform look like? What are the key characteristics of being able to say, oh, yeah, we're a platform business, or we're moving towards a platform business? Well, there are 4 key signals that we look for when we talk about a platform world and being a platform company or brand. The first one is data rich. And we know that this is sort of the North Star that most of us are trying to move towards, is how do we make sure that we are harnessing and owning our own data, but not just that, we're organizing it appropriately and we're understanding it. And we're able to move from a sort of siloed nature of managing data, which is often true of big corporates, where individual departments or business clusters manage data themselves, but into a more open source synergized space where if sales is talking to somebody and customer service is talking to somebody, we can connect the dots and put all of those interactions together and have a better understanding of what that means for us as a business. But data also means interaction. So increasingly, we are creating an ecosystem where we are fighting for people's attention on more than just the product space or the service space. So we're actually getting more and more time and attention from the data individuals or points that we have. So we're actually also creating rich insights from that are helping us build a really strong picture of who our customers and our audience are. Part of that is then what we call network effects. So being able to add value at every single interaction that you have. And again, starting to own more and more of those interactions in somebody's life. So you think about like Google, how many interactions they own in our spaces. It's far bigger than just a Google search, and what that allows them to then do and leverage. Personalized ecosystems is the natural third step from that. So as you have more data, understand it better and organize it better and increase your interaction points, you start to be able to really supercharge your customer's experience. You start to increase your relevance. It becomes a bit of a snowball effect. You start to become more and more integral into their lives. You can capture more and more of their attention over time. That starts to become more and more valuable. And then finally, what having an owned database or kind of data set allows you to do is also go direct to consumer. So you can start increasingly cutting out the middleman, which means that you can save revenue, because your revenue should increase because you're spending a lot less time on paying to rent those eyeballs and that information. You're also then getting that data and insights direct to you, so you're growing your data-rich capability. And you're able to build a relationship that you can own and control. So you're no longer reliant on the quality of service or the kind of ways of operating of another third-party platform. You start to be able to own that space, which for consumers is becoming increasingly important because we hold brands accountable for every touch point, whether it's outsourced or not. So then what does that mean in a marketing world? Well, at Publicis, we have what we call the growth loop, which is the journey that we believe all brands need to be on to use paid in order to ultimately end up at owned. And it doesn't mean that paid is going to be long gone and dead. We always need paid to be able to garner new attention. But for us, what's really important is that are we using all of our paid approaches for online, offline media to not only achieve those immediate short-term marketing strategic objectives of those campaigns or whatever that might be, but also to serve the underlying purpose of how we're building our own audience and what are we doing with that information to ultimately understand and know those people better. And that becomes iterative because that then informs your paid campaign work and strategic thinking. So finally, I just want to leave you with what that intersection point means for content marketing in the context of the rest of today's conversation. Well, content marketing, as we discussed, is about value exchange. It's about knowing who your audience is, giving them value far outside of your brand or your product or service that you're trying to sell. In order for people to choose to spend time with you, to seek you out, and to agree to do a value exchange with you about who they are, their time, their attention, their data. And that value exchange is how you get people into your space. It's also how you keep them there and you continue to add that value. So if you think about that in a more sort of linear way with your more traditional marketing strategies and traditional activations and campaigns, content marketing is that bit up the bottom, the relationship part that's continually running and optimizing, helping you build relationships, helping you own and keep those relationships, and helping you create insights that ultimately inform the work you're doing on the top, which should then become increasingly efficient over time. So just quickly, because I know I'm out of time, at Machine, we have what we call our mantras, which are some of our strategic provocations that we challenge our clients and ourselves with. And one of our mantras, mantra number 5, is this provocation that rented audiences are always going to be expensive risks. And I guess the question is, how is your short-term or your immediate marketing strategic thinking not only aiming to deliver on your immediate requirements, but helping you build in their own space and helping you ultimately set yourself up for success in the platform world?
Thanks so much for that, Sarah. I think the cookieless future definitely looks bright and promising, especially with that perspective of not interrupting and going straight into having a dialogue with the people that you interact with online. So thank you so much for that. If you have any questions for Sarah, please do put it in the Q&A box down here, and we will then pick it up in the Q&A panel. Our next speaker is Candice Lee-Reeves, who is the Senior Digital Copywriter at Evelytic and has created content for a variety of industries and media types for nearly a decade. She researches and writes written content for all areas of Evelytic's business and platform, and she plays a key role in conceptualizing and planning the strategy for the platform's integrated thought leadership campaign. She'll be sharing how leading on value-adding content where the brand or the product is not the hero, but helps to build and retain an engaged audience who opt in to stay subscribed because of the quality of the content marketing and not just what you're selling, allowing for brands to grow and nurture first-party databases that deliver higher return on investment for businesses. Candice, hello.
Hi there.
How are you doing?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Good, good. Happy to have you here. Take it away.
Thank you so much. All right, cool. Well, hello, I'm Candice. I think that you got a pretty good intro to me there, but in a nutshell, I am senior digital copywriter with a passion for strategy by day and a mom and personal development junkie by night. Yeah, that's me. What's coming in my prezzo is I will start by talking a little bit about my own training as a copywriter and how that relates to the fundamentals of marketing in general, particularly content marketing. Then I will speak to the storytelling framework and how to position yourself to your audience. I'll go into the value and business impact of customer centricity, and I will end that with 5 customer-centric tips for email in particular. Cool. So when I was a junior copywriter, when I was learning, the first rule of writing I learned was to know who you're writing to. So in copy, this means understanding the needs of your audience, who you're writing to, providing a solution to those needs, and using a lot of you and your language, so speaking to the audience. But this principle isn't just good for marketing, good for copywriting. It's a general marketing principle that you use across the board, particularly in digital, because I think that so often when we are marketing digitally online, we assume that we're speaking to large audiences all at once, where actually what it is it's one-on-one. Like even this webinar, like I'm talking to you are probably at home or at the office or something on your device, on your laptop, on your phone. This is a one-on-one conversation. And just like if you were at, say, a dinner party, having a one-on-one conversation with somebody, we've all been there where you're having a conversation with somebody who all they can do is talk about themselves. That's what marketing so often is when we don't take a content marketing approach where we focus on the hero, the person who we're talking to. Then, okay, so in Donald Miller's book, Building a Story Brand, he really positions it very well with a 7-step storytelling framework. And it goes, there is a character who has a problem and meets a guide who gives them a plan and calls them to action, which helps to avoid failure and ends in a success. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of everything in the book. I highly recommend it. What I will focus on is the 3 main characters in the story. First, you have the hero, the person everybody wants to be, the person we relate to, we see ourselves in. So many brands position themselves here. This is the equivalent of, talking about yourself at a dinner party, but this isn't the case. The hero is actually your customer. The next character in the story is the guide, the one who knows more than the character does, who teaches them what they need to know on their quest. And this is actually where you come in. You are Yoda. You don't have to speak like Yoda, but you can be Yoda, channel him. And then the third character is the villain. This is the one we fear, which is actually the problems your customers face, the problem that you solve. So in a nutshell, make your customer the hero and you become the guide. Why customer-centric marketing? So there are many powerful stats that speak to the impact of customer-centric marketing. Firstly, buying experiences are based a lot on feeling. Customer-centric companies are 60% more profitable. They drive 4 to 8% higher revenue. And because they address customer needs, they get more positive reviews, which act as business generating social proof. It also gives you a competitive edge because going above and beyond consistently keeps your brand top of mind. And it's particularly useful. I mean, it's useful for all brands, but it can be especially a great differentiator for small businesses who are trying to stand out from larger corporations. It also improves longevity because you're on the ground, you're better able to identify areas of improvement. And it builds long-term relationships by showing that you care, providing relief to the hero for rescuing them from the villain. And it builds trust for long-term relationships. Cool. So now I'm going to go into your 5 customer-centric tips for emails. First one, know your audience better. This is still such a fundamental in marketing in general, and it applies to email as well. So do your market research, get on the ground, have on-the-ground conversations, do your competitor analysis, check out what the competition's doing, how their audience responds. Do your research, understand the people personally. Who are you speaking to? What are their problems? How do they feel about their problems? Understand things like their level of education. The more you know about them, the more you'll know what kinds of things will add value to their lives. Where can you relate to them, and how can you provide value to them? Then know where to reach them. So before they even join your email list, you need to know where to attract them. So this is platform-based. Know which platforms they're on and what topics they interest them. And lastly, a really great place to start is to use this information to create buyer personas. This is a great way to start, segmenting your audience so that you can personalize according to the different types of people you're probably speaking to in your marketing. Tip 2, get smart about collecting your data. So first, start by subscribing your contacts with a short form. Studies have shown that your chances of conversion go down with every form field that you add. So I recommend starting with email address and first name. Some companies even go as low as just getting an email address, and you can do that. But first name gives you a little bit more punch with personalization. Personalization so often gets a lot more engagement. So I recommend those if you can. to get started. Then gather data. This is done over time. Once they're on the list, they've subscribed, then there are two ways to start collecting more data from there. So firstly, you ask them either via surveys or like an update profile campaign and that kind of thing, or you can track their email engagement and behavior, like tracking which links they click, which emails they engage with the most. It's important to do this strategically though, because sometimes it's better to gather data by asking them, sometimes it's better by tracking. Apple Mail's email privacy, for example, is coming into the mix at the moment, which will make tracking something like location a little bit more tricky. So that, for instance, would be something that would be better to ask rather than tracking. But try both out, see what works best for you. Then tip 3, test different content strategies. Email marketing is still the most used channel for interactions between people and companies. But what works for one business won't necessarily work for another. No one size fits all when it comes to email content, but rather it's important to be open to find what works for your particular audience. So stay committed to adding value and A/B test different content strategies to see what works. Over the next 3 slides, I'm going to show you a few examples of how a few different companies use different content types in their emails and what impact this has on their engagement. First, we have One Life. So they've got a very informative, this is a blog type tips kind of email that has a lot of value. It's snackable, so little bite-sized chunks of information. It's like a menu for them, adding bits of value, and they get to choose what interests them that they want to click through to. This it also relates to, the content is related to, obviously, One Life clients or subscribers would probably be interested in this kind of content, and it applies to One Life's products and services. So there's that overlap that Sarah mentioned earlier. It got a pretty standard open rates, but the click rate was 3%, which is above the 2020 median benchmark for finance. And additionally, it gets pretty low unsubscribes, which is actually half the industry average in terms of unsubscribes. And this speaks to that these emails add value to people, that even though they don't necessarily click or open or whatever this particular one, they're still interested in keeping the conversation going. Second example is Flight Centre. Now, this isn't strictly content marketing, it is online retail, but in email marketing, like I mentioned before, it's never one size fits all. In this case, they aren't using content, but the principle is the same. You give your audience content that they can relate to and find value in. So in this example, Flight Centre wanted to share relevant travel deals based on the kind of data that they collected from their audience over time. So like they got travel destination, travel interests, purchase history, shopping preferences. They collected all of that data and put together buyer personas, and then used dynamic content in the email to customize it on send. So if you don't already know, dynamic content is when you can have multiple sections within one email. So you create one email and you have, say, one section dedicated to people who are you want to fly to Bali, and the second section can be to people who want to fly to Egypt, for example. You create it in one email, and when it gets sent, only the people who want to go to Bali get the Bali content, and only the people who want to go to Egypt get the Egypt content. All other content that isn't related to them, they don't see. This saves a huge amount of time when you're trying to personalize email at scale. The results on this email in particular was phenomenal. They got more than a 388% increase in website traffic from the emails, and just short of a 154% increase in email user inquiry submissions on the website. This speaks to the impact you can have when you customize your email content based on the data that you collect over time. Third and last example is us. We, Everlytic, sent an email to our customers recently, sharing a video of an ad that we had put together. And I think it speaks to the efficacy of video in general. So we put the word video in the subject line and the preview text. And the results we got were, the opens were 21.6%, which is slightly above the industry average. But more importantly, the clicks were 6.6%, which was more than 3 times the industry average. And clicks to opens were 30.7%, which is also about 3 times the industry average. So video is on fire. Get in there and use it everywhere, wherever you can, even in the emails. And tip 4, this is about automation and customer journeys, where you use your subscriber data, not just to customize individual messages, but the entire email experience automatically. So automation enables you to set up parameters for personalization in the system and automate personalization, the personalization process on every send, saving you time, like the dynamic content example that I mentioned earlier. It's also where it gets fun, at least I think it's quite fun, because once you know what different segments of your audience want, then you can get really creative with the journey. So you could do workflows like this, for example, where you can customize the send date and the send time. You can put strategic delays between messages. You can have conditions for sending, like, are they male or did they are they female? Did they click a link in the last email? Essentially adapting the journey in real time based on data you're collecting, like, on the go. So it's really, really powerful. You can also hyper-personalize all of the content in the email. So things like personalization tags, name, ID number, location, whatever you've collected on them. Dynamic content, like I mentioned before, and filters. So you can send to certain segments of your audience, based on whatever demographics or interest-based data that you've collected. And lastly, tip 5, be self-aware and agile. So this relates to your degree of openness to receiving new information. It's important to approach email marketing with an open mind that what works now can change at any time. So keep an eye on the results, on your stats, on your reporting. Assume that there's always more to learn. Also, a common thing businesses do is they end up becoming content-centric. So the focus is very much on the internal process of creation and distribution, like write a blog, share it on your platforms. And it's just this like production line situation. But that's not actually what content marketing is. Not content marketing, customer-centric marketing is. Customer-centric, on the other hand, is part of a much larger integrated communication strategy with your customer in the middle. Look at where they are, what their interests are, what their platforms they're using, and then produce your content for that. And that is me.
Thank you so much for that. I think for the longest time, we were all stuck with there is no try, only do. Now we know what to do and to do it well. So thank you so much for the tips and for this framework. We have also shared the link to the article from Donald Muller in the chat. And I also see some wonderful questions, including from you, Jessica. So please do share your questions in the Q&A section down here. And even you, Edward, thank you so much, because we can see some of the questions even lead to more conversation, which we will cover in the panel. So just before we get to our final speaker, we will also be having one more poll. And here we're asking you, what do you think is the most important key measure of success in content marketing? Is it user behavior? Is it engagement? Is it impressions and click-through rates? Or is it conversions around revenue? So using everything that you've learned so far through our speakers, I'd be excited to hear your answers. Oh, it's a tight one. It's a tight one. I mean, I can even see some of the questions that people are asking. Edward is asking, to what extent is the audience's privacy respected in data collection and use? I look forward to hearing that answer. Cool. And most important key measure is engagement for most of us, 42%. And coming in second is the user behavior. I think moving into that customer-centric world will definitely then answer both questions. And so for our final speaker is Bronwyn Bowley, who is the Senior Content Manager at Jellyfish, an IAB SA Digital Content Marketing Committee member with more than 15 years of solid experience in traditional through-the-line marketing departments with companies operating in the tourism, publishing, retail, and manufacturing sectors. She joined digitally progressive Jellyfish with an intent to specialize in content marketing and digital public relations, how to gain insights from these audiences based on their content marketing engagement, and having had first-hand experience into the development of the digital age in marketing and seen the industry evolve and develop a more refined and strategic measurable tool, this has evolved her key objective to provide the brands with whom she partners with a quantifiable return on investment in the scope of content marketing. Bronwyn, hello.
Thank you. Thank you for that intro. Yes, so that's me in quite an involved nutshell. As mentioned, I'm a senior content manager for Jellyfish, and I manage content strategy, execution, and performance for a number of South African and international brands. And my talk today is about why your content strategy should be data-driven. So to that end, my chat is very practical, and it's about applying content marketing that's purposeful and objective driven. So I'll be talking about the content funnel, determining objectives, determining your content need, measuring that performance, and then just a few case studies. So what we must remember is that content, yes, it helps your business accomplish their goals, but as Candace put it so nicely, good content helps users accomplish their goals too. So remember to be customer-centric, not just content-centric. So we all know that there is a user journey, and different users are in different stages of the journey. So it makes sense to serve content for those different stages of the user journey. And again, as Candace mentioned, there's a villain. And why do people go online? And that's often to solve problems. And so at the top of the funnel, we have the awareness. And this is the user who often has a problem, but they don't know how to solve it. And so that's where we come in with content that reaches and inspires. They may not be aware of your brand, your product, or your service. So we give them content that cultivates brand and category awareness in that early stage of the user journey. So then we move into the consideration phase of the funnel. This is the user that knows they have a problem and they know how to solve it, but they haven't decided on the brand that they're going to use. So they're actively researching. We call this the prospecting user. So here is your opportunity to empower, educate, and enable, and you give this user useful information. The content that you give them is not brand centric, it's not sales driven, it's useful and it's valuable. And then we move further down the content funnel into the conversion stage. So here we have a user who has a high probability of transacting in a way, thanks to all your awareness and consideration content. You've convinced them. They are now ready to transact, be it take out their wallet and make a purchase, or to sign up for a newsletter. So they are looking for a very specific information that assist them with that transaction. And then finally, we have content in the advocacy stage. So this is your captured audience. This is the audience that you want to remain loyal to your brand. And so we serve them content that maintains that value and loyalty relationship. So if we had to look at it at an even more granular level, we break it down into what we call hero, hub, and hygiene content. So right at the top of the funnel, we've got our hero content. What does it do? It's boosting your brand. It's driving awareness, large volumes of traffic. And what does it look like? It's targeted editorial. social media campaigns, and digital PR. And then in the consideration phase, in the center, we want to engage that actively prospecting audience. We want to convince them. So what does it look like? We've got product news, guides, downloadable ebooks, downloadable white papers. And then finally, in that conversion stage, the hygiene content, what do you want to do? You want to convince them to transact, sign up for the newsletter, purchase that pair of shoes that they've been looking at. So you provide product descriptions, FAQs, and reviews that nurture that transactional action. So now you need to formulate your content strategy. So obviously you need to set your objectives. So what does your business want to achieve with the content that you create? Putting it in a simple form, content achieves 4 pillars. It can be a traffic driver, a sales channel, a lead generation, or a brand advocate. What's important is that it be actionable, measurable, and tangible. And I'll explain how you can go about doing so. So first of all, we have a look at your business objectives. So there may be some of these, and there may be a combination of these because, objectives are never simple. So it could be that you want to build out a first-party database. As Sarah mentioned, the benefits and the merits of having that database and the insights that you get from it. You could want to connect with a very specific audience. You might just want to target millennials. You could want to increase the quality of your leads if you are a sales-driven company. You might want to raise brand awareness because you're a challenger brand in the market. You might want to tap into a new market. You might want to increase your visibility in the search engine results pages when people are searching online organically. You might want to foster brand advocacy or drive sales conversions. Once you've set your business objectives, don't forget about your users' objectives. What's important to them? And some of these objectives may be they're looking for a platform that's easy to navigate. They're looking for content that is engaging. They're looking for content that's relevant to their search. They're looking for the rewards in that content. And they're looking for proof of expertise. If you're a finance brand, has that content been written by an economist or a banker? If you're a medical brand, has that content been written by a registered nurse or a physiotherapist or a doctor? People value expertise. So chatting a little bit more about first-party data, it's important to remember that it's about that fair value exchange. It's become more important than ever to build up those meaningful relationships with your customers so that you can deliver the right type of content experience. And that means being able to create personalized content. The more personalized the content is, the more the customer considers that a valuable exchange of their information. So why do we do it? Brands need that reliable data to understand their customers. And the customers are more likely to share their data if they see value in doing so. And how can we achieve that? Through loyalty programs, quality news portals and subscriptions, blogs and webinars, and then websites, apps, email lists. So we need to look beyond the blog where in the old school tactics where you used to see the CTA that said sign up for our newsletter about X products. If you think about it, that was really just an advert for that company's products. And if everyone was getting the same newsletter, that didn't really qualify as a value add-on, and your drop-off rate was likely to be quite high. So if we look at the first-party data privacy by design model, how do we go about doing so? So there are 4 sections to it. First of all, there's consent and collection. So we create first-party data collection using an approved framework that's POPI compliant. And then we analyze and look at the insights. And from those insights, we enable actionable insights that deliver business value. And then we target and activate. That means you're able to personalize your content for your respective target audiences. And then finally, very important, we need to measure the results. So basically understand how your content equates to value for your brand. So now that you've set your objectives, you need to determine what content you need. And these are just some of the data-driven methods you can use when creating your content strategy. If you have an existing website, if you have existing content, I highly recommend conducting a content audit. So what that does is it looks at how your content is performing. So for instance, if you have gone through the trouble of investing in content creators and you've built up a repository of 200 plus blogs, but the content audit reveals that of the 200 blogs, only 20 blogs are driving 80% of your organic traffic over a 12-month period, then you need to relook at the strategy. Why are people not reading the majority of your blogs? Are they not optimized, or is it not considered relevant to their search? I'd also recommend checking the search landscape in your respective vertical. How are people searching? This means you need to look at keyword research. What keywords are important to your user? And then go in and optimize your content accordingly. What's also important to note is that you don't just optimize written content. There are a number of different mediums that can be optimized. For instance, PDFs can be optimized for search. YouTube videos can be optimized for search. You need to send signals to Google so that your content is highly visible in an organic landscape. Then a competitor analysis. It always helps to have a look at what the neighbors are doing and what the neighbors are doing well, because not only does it provide inspiration, but it helps you see where the gaps in the market are. And with a competitor analysis, it lends into what we call the skyscraper technique. So find out what your competitors are doing well and then improve upon it. Then you can also look at your audience personas and refine these. It's highly unlikely that you're writing for a single audience. So have a look at your different audience personas from the insights you've gained from your first party database, perhaps, and see what kind of content resonates with them. We know that millennials prefer videos. We also know that they are often looking at content on their mobile phones, whereas the baby boomers, they're prepared to invest in long form editorial content, and they're almost always looking at content on their desktops. Have a look at the gap analysis. It's highly competitive to write the sort of content that everybody's doing. Have a look at where there are gaps in the market and try to fill that. And that will give you the competitive edge over your contemporaries. And then look at your content split. If your content audit reveals that your website is actually heavily weighted towards transactional content, that lower funnel content, perhaps you could consider adding that consideration and awareness content. You have to consider that not everyone who goes onto your website is ready to transact. They may still be actively prospecting, and you need to convince them and empower them with information before they're ready to make a transaction on your website. So just some of the tools that you can use to obtain the data that you need. Some are paid, some are free. I would highly recommend using Google Search Console and Google Analytics. I personally like Ahrefs and SEMrush because they have a great content marketing section to those tools, but it really comes down to personal preference and what adds value to your analysis. So then you need to align your objectives and data to create that strategy that serves the right content formats on the platforms that will give you gain you the most traction. So some of these formats could be, and it could be a combination of all of these, a blog editorial, email newsletters. You might invest in infographics, case studies, white papers, video tutorials, testimonials, or podcasts. And then your KPIs and success metrics should relate to the overarching goals of your content marketing strategy. This means you obviously need to measure your performance, which I recommend doing on a monthly, quarterly, and yearly basis. So some of these may be measuring your organic traffic. Did it rise in over a 12-month period? Did you see an increase in page views or quality lead generation? Did your social shares increase? Have your backlinks increased? Has your user engagement increased? And have your sales conversions increased? And yes, content marketing can help you increase all of these metrics. So to chat about some case studies, first of all, we can look at BUT. They're a retail store and they asked for content marketing assistance in two phases. Higher up in the funnel and then lower down in the funnel. They wanted to engage with their audience in the awareness phase, and then they also wanted to improve their lower funnel content with the purchasing process. So what we did was we utilized a content strategy where we created 350 editorial articles in the first 3 months of that project duration, to serve that top funnel phase. And then we optimized their lower funnel transactional copy. And the results we gleaned were 6 million organic blog sessions annually and a 12% increase in the added to basket rate. And then another case study that we can look at was L&C Mortgages. They are obviously a mortgaging company, and what they wanted to try and increase was brand awareness. So what we did was we came up with quite a unique off-the-ball idea, was to have a look at the property industry in the virtual world instead of the real world. So we had a look at some video games and things like Skyrim, and the premise was how much would these video game homes cost in the real world? And it was presented and illustrated as a set of lovely graphics, which were then hosted on the brand site and was then also reached out to the media. So the reason you want to reach out to the media is for them to host it on a third-party website, because this will increase the site's domain authority and also get you backlinks back to your site. So the brand accrued 4,000 backlinks over a 3-month period. They accrued 11.4 million coverage views, and they earned 32,000 earned sessions. And this particular project earned a number of industry awards as well. And that is all from me. Thank you very much for listening to my chat.
Thank you so much for that, Bronwyn. We also have more information if anyone wants to in our chat section, where you can then read more from Jellyfish on content and e-commerce. Thank you so much for that, Bronwyn. I will now invite all of our speakers to please switch on their cameras as we go into our panel Q&A. And I can see that's already a space that's buzzing from everyone, from Jessica to Lebone. So I will start with the first question, and this one is to Candace from Jessica Hannah. What are your thoughts on looking into data and insights first, and then using surveys to confirm or ask for the additional information that you might need?
Yeah, so definitely. I think that the more you can use your data to customize your campaigns and your strategy, the better. So it's no use asking people for information that you already have, right? So definitely do your research, check your data, and go from there.
Thank you. And then to Sarah, speaking to the importance of the value exchange, how does one determine the right value exchange for a brand so that it aligns with one's larger brand values and strategy and meets the audience's needs?
There's so many things. I love the grid that Bronwyn referred to, where she talked about content audiences and understanding what's out there from a competitive point of view. You don't want to necessarily just do what you've been doing in the past and it hasn't worked, or doing what potentially is already a very cluttered competitive space. So I think there's some good hygiene practice to follow when you're thinking and coming up with your content marketing strategy. I think there's also, and everyone has talked to it today, deep importance in really getting to know your audience. I think a lot of brands think they know their audience, and there was persona work maybe done 5 years ago, and we just know that that is not sufficient for how quickly we all evolve and how quickly our landscape changes. So I think that's really, really important. And then I think the third thing, which is an ongoing challenge, is being able to integrate your content marketing strategy across the marketing strategies across your business. Because ultimately content marketing should supercharge all of the other work that you're doing. And that requires an enormous amount of integration and collaboration, which is also important when you're coming to measure the effectiveness of content marketing, because it doesn't operate in a vacuum or a silo. You have to be able to attribute it alongside all of your other strategic work. And that often means, I think, where it's best done is where the clients I work with are able to integrate also their departments, their digital department, their sales department, their brand teams, and their communications teams, which are often separate entities. But that's often where you can really intersect, firstly, what your audience actually needs, what the market actually needs, but also what your business needs, and how it's measuring success more broadly.
Thank you. Then this is for Bronwyn. Which platform, in your opinion, is strongest in driving traffic to websites using video as it relates to both paid advertisement and organic?
Which platform? With regards to your website, I think video is very, very strong, and doesn't necessarily have to be hosted on YouTube. I think if you have a video on your website, it's just as valuable, and we see that video is fast becoming the preferred medium, especially with sort of the how-to and solution-driven narrative, especially in the retail and the beauty sector. So by all means, I think if you have the capacity and the means to invest in video, it's definitely an avenue to explore. And by all means, I would suggest, if you can, host it on your own website and a YouTube channel, I'd go with both.
Thank you. And this one is from Shivani, and it's for Candace. How does the industry define success in terms of response rates?
So this comes down to the benchmarks, I think. I think it's good to understand what the norms are in, South African space, as well as within your industry. So if you can find the benchmarks, as far as I know, I think Evalytics is the only one that has South African benchmarks. Have a look at those. That's broken down by industry in terms of open rates and click rates and click to open. And that kind of thing. In terms of response, there's not much on response specifically in the benchmarks, so I'm not sure about that. But I think that looking at that data will give you something to measure against to start with.
Thank you for that answer. And this one is to Bronwyn. Does content marketing work for B2B or B2C businesses?
Really, it works for both. There's sort of long been held that misconception that it was only those consumer-facing companies that should invest in content marketing, but that's really not the case. If you have an audience that you need to engage with, you can serve them with content that is solution driven. And honestly, with a business-to-business brand, you need to generate quality leads. So serve them with those excellent success stories and those testimonials. That forms part of content marketing. So there's really an avenue for both business to business and business to consumer brands.
Thank you. And I just want to acknowledge everyone who has to jump off right now. We are continuing until 1:15, but thank you to Henny, Kashmal. Thank you all for joining us. We will still be continuing with the Q&A. Maybe you guys can catch the recording after this. Off the back of the question I just asked you, Bronwyn, another question that was asked by Anonymous was, how can the principles of content marketing be used by small businesses?
I think if your question is relating to budgets, perhaps, and is this something that the small to medium-sized business can execute, then definitely. In fact, it's something that you can probably do in-house on perhaps a smaller scale. You don't need to invest in a huge video studio. Have a look at your objectives relative to your need, and perhaps start small, and maybe just with a blog to begin with, and then see where you get the best traction, and do one thing well and then lead on from there.
Thank you. And this one is for Sarah from Mangroba. What are the content marketing services items? Am I asking that question correctly? Yes.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's meant by services items, but in terms of capabilities that you might ask a specialist team like an agency to do, we definitely package it up in a couple of different ways. There's what we call strategy and intelligence, which is a lot of the upfront work that Bronwyn was talking about, like understanding your audience is a huge part of that, journey mapping, doing audits, doing search planning, keyword planning, thinking about mediums and channels once you know who your audiences are. The whole strategic thinking around that, looking at your competitors and where the opportunity is in relation to your budget and your objectives. On our side, we also do a lot of what we call intelligence, which is looking at that within your business digital transformation. So how do we connect that into building first-party data sets that actually integrate across all of your business offerings, which is a much bigger conversation, but it's important, I think, in terms of long-term value of what you're investing in. And then there's the original content creation, right, which so many amazing creative agencies do in South Africa, whether it's email specific or whether it's video or whatever that more special editorial expertise. I mean, there are tons of amazing people and agencies that do that. There's obviously also your platform providers. So Everlytic is an example of sort of an email platform provider, but again, there's a whole suite of those, and a really good agency can also help advise. I mean, that's definitely part of our job within strategy in terms of being able to deliver kind of content marketing at scale, but also again integrated into your broader marketing strategies, because it shouldn't just be about content marketing in isolation. And then obviously all the reporting and metrics that come out of that, and really integrating them to your business. So I don't know if that's what's meant by sort of services. There's also, I mean, Bronwyn spoke about some tools you can use for planning, like Google Search Console. There are lots of services out there that have very specific offerings. But yeah, most good agencies that have a content marketing specialization should be able to offer a turnkey solution, or at least point you in the direction of the right specialists for different requirements.
One more for you here in the chat, and this is from Wongaletu, and they're asking, what role does content marketing play when it comes to audience segmentation, and what is the best way to tell your brand story in that regard? For you, Sarah.
Such a good question, and it's kind of deep, dense question. So I think the first thing is that content marketing, in understanding your audiences, you strategically upfront do a certain amount of research that allows you to make a potentially quite preliminary segmentation decisions and map out those journeys. But fundamentally, content marketing, once it's in play and in motion, should be informing those segments. And that's where the idea of platform world and having not only a place to store that data, but to actually then unpack it and to organize it and understand it gets really exciting, because you start to understand audience segments in much deeper, more real human ways than old school LSMs or demographics, which in my mind are incredibly limited and outdated ways of viewing people and the way we make decisions and the needs and pain points that we have. So a big part of content marketing and audience segmentation is what you learn from behavior and engagement, and also that helps you understand where people are, when's the right time to talk to them about certain things. So I think that's really important in terms of the first part. And in terms of telling brand stories, well, again, content marketing needs to intersect with all of your other marketing strategies, and it ultimately must ladder up to your broader brand vision, purpose, and your brand strategy. I don't think content marketing's job is to necessarily sell the brand. I think that is the more traditional, that's the brand strategy job, and you're more traditional buffer line role in marketing. But I think content marketing should get someone interested in the brand, should help someone trust the brand, and should open up somebody to have a conversation or to understand or learn more about the brand so that the brand is top of mind. So we should be, from a content marketing point of view, everything we do should absolutely mirror and signal the brand and what it stands for. It should humanize the brand, make it real and tangible. So like B2B, that can be testimonials or case studies as a very tangible example. And again, we should be building an audience who you can then remarket to with the brand story. And those conversations, that content creation work, that strategy work should be hand in hand. So the best is when that's, even if it's different agencies, as an example, that happens in partnership and collaboration.
Thank you, correct. That collaboration is very essential to building that relationship. And this one is for Candace, two questions, one from Babalo, who asked, how do I access Everlytics email marketing benchmarks?
Cool. So you go to the Everlytic website, you go www.everlytic.co.za. You go to resources and click on marketing guides. In there, we've got a whole bunch of marketing guides, but if you scroll down, you should see the 2020 email marketing benchmarks report. You can get it from there.
Thank you. And from a content marketing point of view, how long or can my emails be?
So I really liked what Bronwyn shared earlier about understanding generational preferences. So certain generations typically enjoy, older generations might be more likely to enjoy longer content, whereas younger generations may prefer more snackable ones. But interestingly, we did find in research a little while ago that students still liked longer form content. So I think that it really comes down to testing your particular audience, because even though there can be stats about broader audiences here, you got to remember that your list is absolutely unique to you. So definitely worth testing, understanding your audience, and then just testing different strategies. So Everlytic and many others, similar platforms will enable you to do A/B testing. So you can test like different subject lines and different lengths of content and image ratio and that kind of thing. So test and play around and see what gets the best response.
Thank you. And to our final question, this is for Bronwyn. Anonymous, I don't know why they're going anonymous. Maybe they had to drop off, so they didn't want their name to be said when they're not here. But they'd like to know more about the check the search landscape. Any reads that you can recommend, please, and thank you.
I love HubSpot, and I think if you go onto HubSpot, you can sign up for free stuff, and everybody loves free stuff, and I mean, they're actually a good example of content marketing, because they're prepared to give you all this wonderful, valuable information and educate you in the process. But I think if you really want to upskill yourself in that particular sector, they stand out for me. So perhaps have a look at HubSpot.
Thank you so much. I just want to thank all of our speakers for joining us. Thank you for even going over time with our Q&A. If you have any more questions to our viewers, please feel free to mail us, feel free to tweet us. We will be sure to answer all of your questions. So thank you to all our speakers. Also want to thank our guests, from Bev Lebone to Wongale to what's it? Oh, sorry, I'm going through all of your names, to Gian, to Welsh. Thank you, Mulebogeng. Thank you all for joining us. It has been a pleasure to be with you. And to our IAB Insight partners, Jellyfish, Gumtree, Everlytic, Ornico, and Biz Community, thanks again for helping and giving this discussion the space it deserves. To our production team, as always, stellar work. And to all of you joining us from your homes, your offices, now that we're all getting vaccinated, your cars on a run, we see you and appreciate you coming through. See you all on our next episode on the digital influencer marketing on the 20th of October. Have a beautiful rest to your week, and goodbye.